Welcome to Cheat Masters. Let's dive into today's story. I never imagined I'd hear my own wife speak about me like that. We were at a house party, one of those wild get-togethers where drinks flowed freely, conversations overlapped, and laughter rang out a little too loudly. It was hosted by our old college friend, Jason. Betty had been looking forward to it all week, reminding me at least 5 times to leave work early. She used to thrive in social settings like these, dressing up, reconnecting with friends, letting loose for the night. But lately, things had changed. For the past year, our marriage had felt less like a partnership and more like a routine. The warmth we once shared, the long talks, the spontaneous laughter, and even the physical closeness had slowly faded. I didn't want to acknowledge it, but I felt it. We still lived under the same roof, still shared a bed, still went through the motions of being husband and wife, but something crucial had slipped away, and tonight I was about to realize just how much. Jason was in the middle of an animated story about some workplace disaster. The room buzzed with laughter, glasses clinked, and music pulsed through the air. I sipped my beer absent-mindedly, barely engaged in Jason's tale, my attention drifting. Betty, on the other hand, was downing drinks like she was trying to drown something. I watched her move through the crowd, graceful, effortless, the way she used to be when we first met. She was deep in conversation, laughing easily, her cheeks flushed from alcohol. She looked genuinely happy, but not with me. I wasn't even in her orbit. At some point, I found myself slouched on the couch, locked in a shallow conversation with Jason. He was venting about some impossible boss, but I wasn't really listening. Then it happened. Across the room, I heard her voice. "So, how's married life treating you?" It was Tanya, one of Betty's closest friends, someone who had been part of our lives since college. Betty laughed loudly. She waved a dismissive hand, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please," she scoffed. At this point, Matthew is just my roommate. A brief silence. Then a few uneasy chuckles, the kind people force out when they're not sure if something was meant to be funny. Tanya offered a tight-lipped smile and took a sip of her drink. Someone else jumped in to change the subject, but I didn't catch what they said. I wasn't moving, just my roommate. The words hit like a slap. I stared at her, half expecting her to glance my way, to notice my reaction, to realize what she had just said. But she didn't. She kept laughing, kept chatting, completely unfazed. The words echoed in my head, over and over, as the party's noise faded into the background. At first, I tried to convince myself I had misheard. Maybe the alcohol had loosened her tongue, and it was just a careless joke. But no, I knew Betty. This wasn't an accident. This was the truth. My grip tightened around my beer bottle. My jaw clenched slightly. I glanced around, but no one seemed concerned. No one turned to see if I had heard. Because, in their minds, I already knew. And maybe that was the worst part. Was this how she spoke about me when I wasn't around? Had she already told them I was nothing more than a person she shared a house, bills, and a bed with, but not her heart? I wasn't sure what hurt more, hearing it for the first time or realizing she had likely said it before. I didn't react. I didn't confront her. I didn't demand an explanation or cause a scene. I just sat there, letting those words settle inside me like a stone sinking to the bottom of a deep, dark pool. Betty kept laughing, kept drinking, kept being the life of the party. But for me, the party was over. The rest of the night blurred into meaningless noise and empty conversations. I went through the motions, nodding when spoken to, forcing a polite smile when needed, even managing a chuckle or two when the moment called for it. But inside, something had shifted. I started truly watching her, observing every little detail. She leaned into conversations, fully engaged, completely present, but never with me. When she laughed, tossing her head back, her eyes sparkled with genuine amusement. She had this effortless way of making everyone in that room feel like they were the most fascinating person in the world. Everyone except me. She barely acknowledged my presence the entire night. And when she did, it was fleeting. A glance in passing, never lingering, never carrying the warmth it once did. And that's when it hit me. Had it always been this way? Had I just refused to see it? For months, maybe even longer, I had felt the distance growing between us. At first, I ignored it, convinced myself it was just life. Work stress, routine, exhaustion. But it wasn't. There had been signs. Subtle but undeniable. The way she shifted away when I put my arm around her. The way she stopped kissing me goodnight, always claiming she was too tired. The way she seemed more invested in her phone than in anything I had to say. And tonight, she had finally said it out loud. She had confirmed what I had been too afraid to admit. I felt like a fool, sitting there, watching her move through the crowd like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just crushed whatever hope I had left. By the time we got home, the party's buzz had faded, but Betty was still giggling at something on her phone as she kicked off her heels. She swayed slightly, still tipsy, still lost in whatever world she was living in. Meanwhile, I stood in the doorway, watching, waiting. For what? A glance? A comment? Any kind of acknowledgement that she realized what she had said? Nothing. She went about her routine, set her phone down, stretching, walking toward the bathroom, completely unfazed. My jaw tightened. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I wasn't letting this slide. Do you even hear yourself? My voice came out calm. Too calm. Betty turned, frowning. What? At the party, I said, stepping forward. You called me your roommate. For a split second, there was hesitation, just a flicker. She remembered. Then she rolled her eyes, like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. Oh my God, Matthew, she groaned. It was just a joke. I exhaled slowly. A joke. I repeated, tilting my head slightly, because it didn't sound like one. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. You're overreacting. There it was. That familiar, casual dismissal. The same way she brushed off everything I tried to talk about. The same way she ignored every problem between us. She was comfortable with this version of our relationship, the one where I accepted whatever little affection she decided to give, the one where I stayed no matter how lonely I felt. I took another step forward. No, Betty, I said, my voice steady. I'm being honest. And I need you to be, too. For the first time that night, she hesitated, arms crossed, weight shifting slightly, like she suddenly wanted to be anywhere but here. At the party, she could avoid me, ignore me, laugh it off. But now, in the quiet of our own home, there was nowhere to hide. I searched her face, looking for something, remorse, regret, even the slightest flicker of understanding. All I saw was irritation. She didn't want to deal with this, with me. And that hesitation, that reluctance, it said everything. I wanted her to tell me it wasn't true, to say she didn't mean it. More than anything, I wanted her to fight for us, but instead, she just looked annoyed. Matthew, can we not do this right now? She muttered, rubbing her temples. I let out a bitter laugh. Right now? I echoed. This has been going on for a long time. You barely talk to me anymore. I shot back. We hardly touch. We don't laugh like we used to. And now you're telling your friends I'm just your roommate. She let out a sharp breath. You're making this into a bigger deal than it is. No, Betty. I shook my head. For the first time, I think I'm finally seeing things for what they are. She didn't respond. And in that silence, I understood I had been fighting for something that only I cared about. That night, I didn't sleep. Betty, of course, drifted off almost instantly, curled up on her side of the bed, her back to me. That was how she always slept now. Like she was putting a physical barrier between us, a silent confirmation of the emotional distance that had been growing for months. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to her slow, steady breathing, completely undisturbed. She wasn't replaying the night in her head. She wasn't thinking about what she had said or how it had made me feel. No, to her, it was nothing more than a careless remark, an offhand joke she had already dismissed. She had rolled her eyes, brushed it off, and moved on. Meanwhile, I was left wide awake, feeling like my entire marriage had just unraveled before me in a way I could no longer ignore. Was this what marriage had become? Just two people coexisting, sharing the same space, the same bed, but living completely separate lives? No. I thought back to how we used to be. Staying up late, talking about everything and nothing. The way she used to reach for me in the middle of the night, half asleep, but instinctively pulling me closer. Back then, I felt like I belonged in her world, not just like someone she happened to share a home with. When had that changed? Had it happened slowly, piece by piece, slipping away so gradually that I didn't notice? Or had she checked out all at once, and I had just been too blind to see it? I turned my head to look at her. She was sound asleep, completely at peace, completely unaffected. And that's when I knew I was the only one holding on to something that was already gone. She had already moved on. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, she had made her choice. She had just never bothered to tell me. By morning, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to keep fighting for a place in her life. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of attention or hold on to the hope that things would magically go back to how they used to be. I couldn't keep living in this house, in this marriage, feeling like a stranger. I was done being her roommate. For the next few days, I went through the motions. I got up, went to work, came home, made dinner. On the surface, nothing changed. But inside, I'd already left. Everything felt different now. Betty carried on as if nothing had happened. Waking up, scrolling through her phone first thing in the morning, sipping her coffee in silence, heading off to work without a word beyond the usual pleasantries. When we were in the same room, we weren't together. We were just there, two people occupying the same space, nothing more. She didn't even notice when I started pulling away. She didn't realize I spoke less, that I had stopped reaching out, that I no longer asked about her day. She never even noticed when I stopped making her coffee in the mornings. Piece by piece, I was letting go, and she didn't even see it. I was slowly removing myself from her life, and she never once seemed to notice. That was my final confirmation. She didn't care. If she had, she would have seen the signs. I started making arrangements, searching for apartments, reviewing my finances, and transferring money from our shared account into my personal one. The only thing keeping me tied to this place was my own reluctance to admit I had been wasting my time. One by one, I packed my things, not all at once, just gradually. A few clothes, my work essentials, little things she wouldn't immediately realize were missing. I emptied my side closet bit by bit, taking only what was truly mine, my books, my documents, my laptop. She never asked. She never noticed. The divorce papers had been ready for a while. I had looked into the process long before that night at the party, maybe because, deep down, I already knew where this was going. I just wasn't ready to accept it. Filing was simple. We had no property to divide, no children, nothing that required negotiation, just years of memories that had already crumbled into nothing. So I signed. I waited until she was out with her friends. One last night of playing single while still having a husband at home. I packed my last bag, took only the essentials, and before walking out the door, I placed the divorce papers in a plain manila folder on the kitchen table. No note, no explanation. There was nothing left to say. As my final step, I canceled our joint credit cards. With that, the last remaining ties between us were gone. No shared finances, no obligations, nothing she could use to pull me back in. She had let go of this marriage long, before I had. I was just the one making it official. No goodbyes, no dramatic speeches. Just the quiet sound of the door closing behind me. The first night alone felt unfamiliar, not painful, not devastating. Just quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Then the messages started. At first, they were casual. Hey, where are you? Then the tone shifted. What is this? Did you file for divorce? Did you cancel the credit cards? We need to talk. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She missed the convenience of having me around. I ignored them all. Then one day, a longer message came through. Look, I don't know why you're acting like this, but we need to talk. I feel like you're making this bigger than it is. Can we meet? I agreed, not to fix anything, but to see if she had finally realized what she had lost. She was already there when I arrived at the coffee shop. She looked different, restless, uneasy. When she saw me, she forced a smile. "Hey!" I gave a small nod and sat across from her, waiting. She hesitated. "I just feel like this whole thing got blown out of proportion." I exhaled slowly. "You think I left because of one thing you said?" She blinked, caught off guard. "I left because that wasn't a joke, Betty. That was the truth. You just finally said it out loud." She looked away. "I didn't mean it like that." I stood up. "Take care of yourself, Betty." And for the first time in years, I walked away, finally knowing exactly where I stood. Thank you for watching.